I want to show you a little bit of these things, so you just get a quick idea of how amazing the cross is. And I'll just begin to say this. You've probably seen. Can you grab me a copy of Nature and Character from there? We did a book some years ago. It took 14 years to do, but it's this one here. I can't see. I can't see. Oh, there it is. There. So this book took 14 years to put together, and it's actually supposed to be part one of a 3-volume set. So I hope the last two don't take 14 years each, because I'm going to be very old. Maybe I'll get on your chart there after 28 years more. But this is actually only volume one of a 3-volume set. So I wanted to explain to you what this is. It's called The Nature and Character of God, and so are the other two books to come. But it has a subtitle underneath it, and the subtitle will be different in each one of these. This is called The Magnificent Doctrine of God in Understandable Language. And what we tried to do with this, and I'll also send you a digital version of this so everybody can have it. It's hard to get this book now because it hasn't been printed for some time. But I'd like to send you all digital versions you can just stick on your system, and then you'll have access to what's taken about 30 years to put together. But what I wanted to tell you is what is coming, because I've died about 3 times. I've had my practice of dying and coming back. But I wanted to show you what the whole idea of this is. When we look at who God is and what I'll just show you how this thing functions, and then cut across to what I want to get to. This is called The Greatest Study in the Universe, is the study of him. Dorothy Sayers, who was one of C.S. Lewis's friends, she was the only woman that was a kind of an inkling, that was part of that team of people who were Christians, some Catholic, some Anglican, but they were called the Inklings, and they were all writers and very, very, and godly. They really sought God. And Dorothy Sayers said this. She said, if you, by the way, she was one of the top detective fiction writers in her day, and the other one was Agatha Christie. So she did some amazing writing and stuff. That group of people that were part of the Inklings dealt with some of the major problems that was going around. And so we remember people like C.S. Lewis because of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and those kinds of things. But behind all of this were people who were great thinkers, great lovers of God, and then experimental areas. People saw in their stuff, sometimes done as a kind of like a movie, what people had really asked questions about. And so Sayers said this: if you want to be globally good, and this super counts in witnessing to see people saved, if you want to be globally effective, in other words, that whatever you say or talk about will affect people around the world, you have to be good at least in one of 3 things, hopefully all 3. The first one is you have to know English. Now that sounds strange because we have large numbers of countries that their primary language is not English. But English is still the lingua franca of the world. It means this: if you don't know English, you may be awesome at what you do, but you will never be global. What you do will not affect the world. It will affect the world you're in now, but it will never be able to be carried or used again. We read books today and there are books on soul winning, of course. We read books today that swept right across the known world in their time. You have up there, you've got also this man. I just want to show you one little thing of his. Get me John Wesley and grab me one of those little. This is, you got John Wesley up there. He and his brother affected the whole of England, he actually taught chunks of them how to read. And that's, so this man, Methodist, of course, he wasn't called a Methodist in the early days, he was just a saved Anglican. But the work that he did, every single week, he would write songs or poems for people. If they died, he would do sometimes a song for them, or he'd do a poem for them. So here in our New Zealand library, I've got a bunch of cool books. This book is one of a 13-volume set. And I have often musicians that'll come, Christian songwriters, and they'll say, you know, the Lord's helped me and I've written about 40 or 50 songs. And then I pull this out. It's one of 13 volumes. You can see the size of print in it. And I just flick through it and I say, what do you think this is? And they go, well, it looks like poetry and stuff. And I said, yes. Who do you think wrote it? I said, this is almost 300 years old that I'm showing to you. How big is it? There's 14,000 songs and poems in this set. There's 13 volumes here, all this size. So when Sayers mentioned, you've got to know English. It's what is used today globally. So that one there, but the use of English is to go back to very, very early days of when God first started connecting to people outside of just Hebrew and Greek. It's been that. First Bible, German, but now you can get a Bible in almost any language in the world. So that's number one for Sayers' thing. Second one was this. You have to know theology. When she said that, it's not knowing a special kind of theology. You have to know things that are talking about God and his creation, because what you're looking at now is everything. When you're talking about English, whether you're singing it or writing it or listening to it or anything else, you're talking about something that is global. You could sing English, you can speak English, you can hear what we're doing now electronically is English. Secondly, if you plug into that, and that's why Sayers said this, theology, she's talking about God and everything he does. That's what theology is. So when I did this book, which is used as a theology book, it's the only book that says W.A. Pratney, because my publisher thought nobody would buy a book by somebody called Winkie. If you're a gay purple, Teletubby person, then maybe you could be called Winkie too, but Winkie is a weird name, and so it's W.A. Pratney on this. But what we tried to do in this is to simply ask the question, what is God like? And this is not stuff you can get behind, it's stuff that you can't get behind. When we look at the Lord and what he really is, he is so astonishing, so amazing, so multidimensional, that you will never come to an end of it. So what we wanted to know is this: if we have what the Bible says about God, and we've looked at what history he's revealed to the church about him, then we'd have just a little inkling of what he's really like. So we could call this the intrinsic qualities of God, and they're things that you can't get behind. By that I mean this. If I say the word eternal, what does that mean? We don't know what that is, practically, because we're not eternal. We had a beginning. We could live forever. That's what happens when you get saved. You could live forever, but we had a start. He didn't. So what does eternity mean? And the very idea of God having eternity without starting this way and this way, forever. You'll see what I mean by you can't get behind that thing. So what does God say about himself when you look at that one deal? And I used a person that you also have on your little chart list there, he's gone now, is Francis Schaeffer. And Francis Schaeffer had a wonderful summary of what the real God is like. He just had a 3-word description. He is the uncreated, that's one. 2, triune. Secondly, thirdly, creator. Those three words together, he is the uncreated, without beginning. Okay? Nobody made him, he's always been. Second, triune, Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. Distinct, those things, but not one, just one, but one forever, and 1, 2, 3, all separate, but not divided from each other. What does that mean? Just like this. Here's H2O. What does it look like? We know it is, if you've got the third thing, which is called chemistry. H2O is water. Or, what is that? It's a liquid. Could H2O be? Yes, it could be. It could be ice. It could be solid. It could be snow. If it's snow just falling down, it blows your mind too, because it's never the same twice, and there's billions and billions of flakes that come down. And nobody's ever seen those major flakes ever duplicated. So, see what I'm saying? And then, could it be something else? Yes, it could be a vapor. It could be steam. And where they coexist, where you can get a steam and ice and water all at the same time, is called a triple point. So that triunity of God is Schaeffer's picture of that middle word, triune, see? And then the last one is creator. He's the maker of everything. So going back now from that Schaeffer one to Dorothy Sayers' statement, she said, first, you need to know English. Secondly, you need to know theology. And by that, she's talking about the things we just talked about. But the third thing you need to know, and this is the one I really liked, is chemistry. When I got saved, my love for studies and things like that was when I was 12 years old, I saw a movie. I got to see a movie because my mother made a lot of money in our tiny little town of Manurewa, Manurewa, Manurewa. So people say, Manurewa, what kind of town is Manurewa? I tell them, it's a town just like you think it is. It's a tiny little town, but she had the first lending library in all of South Auckland. And then she was an entrepreneur and stuff like this. And our local movie theatre, which was an old one, came to my mother and said, our theatre is getting run down. We need to fix it up. Would it be possible for you to help us to raise some money so we could fix our theatre up? So this is what my mother did. She put on 5 concerts, major pop concerts, each night a different one. It's like starting with Adele, and then you go to Katy Perry, and then you go to Beyonce. And every night there was a major singer from using one of our major musicians or singers in that little theatre. It jammed out the theatre. There were if you're going to go and see some of the major singers of your time, and every night there's a different one, you're going to make an awful lot of money if you're just a little theatre. So at the end of it, they had not only made enough to fix their theatre up, but to make 2 other theatres. And I still have a ticket to one that's still around today, and this is like 50 or 60 years ago. So in that, she not only was paid for that, they gave us, this is the trippy thing, they gave us lifetime passes to the movies. Not just, the ones that if you're platinum, you can go to this one cheaper. Lifetime passes to the movies. So every Saturday, if my dad was not going someplace, because he was a famous cyclist, and Didn't think anything of going 100 miles before breakfast. He was just a scary guy like that. And if every Saturday, my dad and I would go to our little theatre, which is about 150 yards away, and watch every movie that ever came out. So I'm George Lucas's age, and I bet I've watched more movies than George Lucas has. So the core of that thing is to be put in contact with something that's going on all the time, is to do in a way what John Wesley and his brother did, and they were soul winners. Every single week they looked at what the plays that were coming out, the songs that were being sung, and they wrote their own as well. Sometimes they took what had come out as a play and turned it into a form of evangelism or a form of witnessing. So when I have my friend musicians come and they've done their wonderful 80 marvelous songs that God has given them, some are really good, some of them are not. And my friend Dallas Home, who worked for David Wilkerson, he said, sometimes a person give me a song and say, the Lord gave me this song. And he said, I listened to it and I knew why the Lord gave it to him. He didn't really like the song, so he gave it to him. But to write stuff that, or think of stuff, or speak of stuff, or in any way communicate things, that's where we go back to that whole being global. You have to know that first. And that third one that I mentioned was chemistry. The reason why chemistry was fun for me is because I got to start when I was 12 years old. My mother bought me a book. It was called, I still have it today, it was called A Chemist's Dictionary. And it was a book a bit thicker than this. And it wasn't done in such a technical way you could understand, and neither was it a child's book. It was a book to make anything. So I had when 4th of July there, 5th of November here in New Zealand, I made our own fireworks. We could make our own almost anything. Do you see that? The reason is because chemistry is everything. It sounds weird, but you're chemistry, I'm chemistry. We're carbon based. Everything you look at that's living and moving is chemistry. So this is chemistry, us being able to talk together. That's chemistry. What you're reading now is chemistry. These books that you're carrying, the things that you're communicating, all of those are connected. It's not biology, it's not physics, it's chemistry. And that was my love when I was 12 years old. So I wrote, when you were a kid, you're 12 years old, the reason I got interested in chemistry is my father, who I told you briefly who he was. My dad was New Zealand's greatest the greatest cyclist. And that, not the motorbike, Hell's Angel type, but the physical one that you drive yourself with your own feet and stuff. And what he not only did that, in 100 years, my father was the best cyclist New Zealand ever had. In 100 years, that was his record. But he would make his own bikes. And he would make them by taking old bed spread things, and he would cut them up and rebuild them into bike frames and stuff. He built his own bicycles. And they were so good, they called them wizard cyclists. They would be heavy as all get out in those days. And here's 3 things about them that were weird. Number 1, they only had a front brake, not a back brake. Just a front brake. Okay? You think, wouldn't that flip you up? No, because he didn't have any change of gears on the thing. He only had 1 gear for 1 race. If he was going to race in a long thing, he put in 1 gear. So he didn't have multiple gears. And the third weird thing is, it wasn't freewheel. You couldn't just coast down the thing, just like a child's trike. You had to continually do this. And that's why my dad would go up hills as fast as he came down on the other side. And that freaked everybody out because they're all going, My dad was like this. So he made me a bike, of course, when I was 12 years old, and he showed me how to ride, and he took me out for a short ride, 30 miles. I was 12 years old. 15 miles out, 15 miles back, 30 flaming miles on a half-size little bike that had no gears except the one that it put on. And the way you stopped is simply lock your legs, and then you stopped because your legs were tied into the bike. See? The reason we won America's Cup a few years ago is because all of those men have to do this kind of things to shift. They found how Dad did his bike, and they put that in, and so everybody did this instead, and we won. So can you see the weird thing of what one change can do and how much it can affect? And I want your evangelism to affect the world. So does God. That's what he wants. God so loved not just the English world or the British world or the American or the world. And I want you to be global. I want the things that you do and what God puts on your heart to be able to affect anybody in the world. So there's the three. I got to introduce James Tour, who was a lovely man. You know, when you're a chemist since you're 12 years old, and I got to tell you a bit on this, I wrote out from that chemist dictionary what I needed in order to make anything. I wasn't interested in bombs and things. You know, you could make those. I could blow a bunch of people up, but that's not my interest. I wanted to know how you make anything, see? So I thought, what chemicals would you need in order to be able to make anything? So I made a list for my mother, because it was my birthday coming up, and I said, I would really like to be able, not to like large amounts of things, but even tiny amounts, so I could make a tiny amount of anything. So I gave my mother this big list, and she went to it was the guy who's British, and he was the chief importer in New Zealand for chemicals and chemical equipment. So she gives him this list, and he's looking at this list, and he goes, who is this for? You couldn't get it today. You see, it's like, why have you got these things? And they put you straight in jail, and then you could come out later on to explain what kind of chemicals you're using. But he's looking at this, and he said, who's this for? And she said, for my son. And he said, how old is he? And she said, he's 12. And he laughed. He said, I'd like to meet your son. So she said, oh, I'll bring him to you. And 2 days later, she brought back to this man, this 12-year-old punk kid, you know. And the weirdest thing is this, he gave me everything on the list. And he became a friend. And it went like this. If he had something that had tiny chips on it of equipment, when I was in primary school, I had a better lab than the university did. So by the time I got to high school and had my first 5 years of high school, and I got saved the last 3 years of that 5-year time, and this is just the last 3 years, my chemistry was really good. 2 years in a row, I pulled one of the top 2 marks in New Zealand in chemistry. You had to get that to get a university entrance and to go to university. I don't know who the other guy was, but I know all I did, I had an incredible background in something simple. So the funny thing is, when I had a little, he would every now and then call me, so I've got a bunch of equipment here. You might like this, a scratch on this one, there's a chip on that. So I could still show you my lab, it's out there. I'd have to kill you all afterwards because it's secret, of course. But my lab is still here. And I had all this incredible, I had thousands of dollars worth of equipment, and I was 12 years old. So chemistry for me is a really cool thing. And when I met a guy that I think is one of the best, if not the best chemist in the world who lives here, And I want you all to be able to how many of you have heard of James Tour, Dr. James Tour? Okay. Tour is like Tour de France, you know, cycling thing. And James is like the book of James. And he's a university professor, but he's Jewish in his background, not religious Jewish. And he got saved in an amazing way. I want you to be able to talk to people in a way that'll open the door for them with whatever giftings God has put in their lives, and they don't even know who gave it to them, that you'll be able to speak to their hearts and give them a reason to get saved. So many of you don't know who he is, but I will give you a little bit of his story, because this is all part of this whole thing that we're talking about. James Tour, a young man, he was still in high school, and then he was going to go to university, and so he really wanted to be, this is America, of course, he wanted to be a state trooper. You know, I guess it's a cool thing to do. So, but he couldn't. He didn't pass the test because he was colorblind. And if you're a state trooper, you can't arrest somebody for not going through a traffic light when he didn't know what color it was. So apparently in those days, if you had that, you couldn't do it. So his dad said to him, he thought maybe I could do forensic stuff, you know, I could study. And his dad said to him, why don't you take up something simple like chemistry? And then you could do all kinds of things. So he's in university, and he's with another young guy. And the first week you're there, they don't, you know, if you're living there, you have to get, you know, all kinds of stuff and get your books and find out where you're going to be sleeping and all that stuff. So he's washing his clothes, and there's a young guy there, and talking to his friend, he said, what are you going to do? He said, well, I'm going to be a football player. I want to be really good at that. And then he said, but there's another thing that I'd really like to do. And so James said to him, well, what is that? He said, I'm going to be a missionary. And he's Jewish, but he didn't even know what a missionary was. So he said, what is that? And instead of saying, well, here it is, and then giving him a 2-hour lecture on theology, he said, I'll show you. And he got a sheet of paper, about as big as this. And then he scribbled on it 3 things. One of them in the corner was a little stick figure. Now, I'm an awesome artist, but all my stick figures are like this. Just dumb little things, handwritten. See, if you want me to sketch you a face after that, I can't help you. Find somebody else. Get the anointing from them. But I just do little stick figures, and this kid put a little stick figure in the bottom, like that. Put his little stick figure up there, and then he put a huge black, thick line like this, right there. And on the other side, he put a very large stick figure that had shiny stuff all around it. And then James is looking at this, and he goes, what is this? He goes, well, this is us, pointing at the little stick figure. And then he said, well, what's that? He said, that's God. And well, what is the big black line? He said, we can't get through to God. We can't meet him, see, because of that. And he said, well, what is that? And he said, it's called sin. And he goes, but what is that? And this kid is a navigator kid. His parents are navigators. So that's his background and stuff. And he says, instead of, again, saying, well, you know, sin, and give details of the different words used for sin, he opens up this little New Testament he's got. He's got a little New Testament stuck. You should carry something like that. Don't just, it's nice to have one that's, you know, it's just the New Testament, but it's got some Proverbs, and, you know, that's nice too. But if you can, get a whole Bible, get a big Bible, get a big fat Bible. And you won't be able to carry it around all the time. But the reason you should have it is that Well, people used to say, you know, I was shot, but I had my little New Testament here, and it stopped the bullet. Look, if people are going to shoot you, get a serious thing. Don't just get something that's only got bits. Get one about this thing, and get two. Get another one for that you can wear on your back for when you're running away from the dude who has the guns. So uh, get a full Bible. Do not undo that. Many times, just before revivals, people try to get rid of some sections that they don't like or they don't care about. And they'll say, look, I'm not even going to look at the Old Testament. I'm going straight to the New Testament. I'm going to start with Jesus dying on the cross. You can't start there. You've got to start where the Bible starts. It starts with the creation and the creator. If you're going to go out to another country, and Peter that you just saw there and his wife have been missionaries for a long time. If you're going to go to people who have never heard the gospel, you must start where God starts. Start with what the scriptures say. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Then it starts listing what he did. And we don't even come into the picture before he's done a whole bunch of stuff. So begin there. Start with that. So this kid pulls out of his little New Testament there, and he opens it up to, there's only one scripture he opens it up to, and he reads it. If a man lusts after a woman and then the whole heart of it is, this is a sin, this is a wrong thing. He's reading that connected with sexual immorality. This is just a single verse. And young James looks at it and he's totally shocked because his dad got him a job when he was younger in a gas station that was closed up during the night. And his job was just to watch over it and take care of it. And he got involved in pornography. He got, of course, his Penthouse and Playboy and all of those things. So he got hooked on pornography. But he didn't tell anybody, including his father or anybody else. And here's this punk kid who's reading for him a scripture that describes exactly what he did. I don't know how he got it. Must have been God just talking to him. But he's so shocked because he said before, I'm not a sinner. I've never killed anybody and I don't do drugs. And he didn't. He didn't even smoke or drink or anything. He said, I'm not a sinner. And when the kid read the thing, he's, well, I guess I am. See, a simple thing linked to what God says can sometimes go straight to the heart. If you're listening to what he says, you'll learn from many ways witnessing things. But it's really good to be listening to the Lord and saying what he's saying to you to tell them, because then it'll bypass a lot of the things that they may not even respond to. So, give you his little story and then come back. He was so shocked at that in his, remember he's got another week there still getting ready, in his little room there in the university, he actually has this big battle with him to talk to God. And he eventually, he gives him, it's about, I don't know, it was a couple of weeks or what. And he says to God, this is all on his own. He said, I'm a sinner and I don't know how to get through to you. I don't know. I need to give my life to you. That's what he said. And he thought he had the door closed, and it probably was, but somebody came into the room and he didn't turn around, but the room suddenly filled with a sense of the presence of God, and it was the Lord. He came right into his room. Pagan, Jewish kid, addicted, gets totally, radically saved. And that's the one that I talked to a couple of years ago when I got a chance to meet him. This is what he does. He takes his Bible, and this is at 3 a.m, and he reads for an hour. He doesn't read anything else, just the Bible. But he said, sometimes a single word will keep me there for a whole hour just looking at that scripture, looking at that one section. When he's finished that, he goes back and he does it again. He does it every night. And then he goes down to the gym, he works out for an hour and a half, then he comes back about 6 in the morning to Rice University, where he is now. And I think it was about maybe 15, 20 years ago, he was listed as one of the top 100 scientists in the world. A few years later, he was called the top scientist in America. And today, I think he's the best chemist in the world. And I got a chance to see him. For me, that's like Christmas. The reason why is when I got saved, remember what my goal was? I wanted to be a chemist and do that stuff. Those last 3 months before I left high school, we had 1,000 kids in our school. And I realized I never met one kid in our school who was a Christian. I never met one that was a Christian. We didn't even have teachers that were Christians. It was a pagan school. I don't even think we ate fish, so it couldn't have been a Catholic school. So it was a pagan school, see. But because I got saved those last 3 months, I'm looking at a school full of 1,000 people, and I didn't know anybody else who got saved. So they had one friend of mine that needed to go through some university thing in order to go to a Bible college, and he wanted to come to my school. So I went back to the principal, and this is not a Christian man, and I said to him, I'd like to come back and do my last year again. And he said, you graduated. And I said, yeah, but I'd like to do it again. I just think I would like to do it again. And there was no rule that said that you had to leave when you graduated. Sometimes in football you become a holy holdback, and they'll keep you there so you can still be with the team. But I got permission to come back to the school. I asked my parents, could I come back? My dad got saved the same night as I did. I said, could I go back to school and try again? And I did. And with my friend, there's just 2 of us now. One shall chase 1,000. And we had 1,000 in my school. That was cool. 2 shall put 10,000 to flight. Well, we could do 10 schools with this. We didn't do 10 schools, but by the end of that following year, we saw a quarter of the school give their lives to the Lord. And I'm still working with teenagers and college students today because of that one thing. So to meet James Tour, who was probably the best chemist in the world, was like Santa Claus 3 times for me. And the way I got that, connection with him was Chi Alpha. You all understand. How many of you don't know who Chi Alpha is? You would have told them.
Good.
Yes, sir.
They are Chi Alpha.
I know, but you know what that is now. Yeah. So, core of this is that I asked Eli because I knew that there was a Chi Alpha also in Rice. I said, would it be possible for me to meet him, not ask for any long term or anything? I said, I'd just like to hug his neck and thank him for what he's doing for the gospel. So he said, well, I'll check with the Chi Alpha leader there. And he sent a thing. It didn't go to the Chi Alpha leader. It went straight to James Tour in his house. And there's James looking at it. He goes, who is Winkie Pratney? His wife said, oh, I've heard of him. He's famous. He talks to college kids all over the world. He goes, I don't think I'm qualified to talk to this man. But then we get this lovely letter back, and he said, I have a 5-hour window. If you could come, and I think we went all the way from, was it College Station all the way there? It was a long way anyway, 2.5 hours. And it was during it's Veterans Day, when nobody goes to school. You know, the Veterans Day is all the schools are closed and nobody's there. And he was there, but normally you have somebody introduce you to people like that. So we're driving through the rain and the mist, and then for half an hour in you know, our Big Rice is a huge campus, and there's nobody there to show us anything. So after half an hour, we actually found somebody who said, "Oh, you're talking about the nanotechnology board, that's way over there." So we find it. I get there, go up, there's nobody to introduce us or anything. But then I see beside the office that's supposed to be his, a little glass thing, and I look inside and there's a bunch of kids in there, just like this smaller, of course. And they don't care if Veterans Day or anything else. They are so excited about what they're doing. They're still here. And then I heard him talking. He was counseling somebody on the phone. So finally, the guy who was supposed to introduce us comes and gives us nano water and whatever things you're supposed to have. And then I get to meet him. You know what the first thing he said to me is, "What is your story?" So I told him my story. I told him what I just told you. And then he told me his story, and that's what I told you too. You know. And I got, for about an hour and a half, I got to not just hug his neck, but to talk to him and ask him some of the questions that you and I would be asking because of chemistry. And I got to introduce him, this is about 2 years ago, at College Station, because he hadn't spoken there. So I'm here, you know, in New Zealand, and he's 10,000, nearly 12,000 miles away there. So you know how I introduced him? He was in the audience, and most of the kids, they didn't know, hadn't met him or anything. He's there. And I was asked to introduce, so I told him what I just told you at the start of this about 10 or 15 minutes ago, about this lady called Dorothy Sayers, who said if you want to be globally known, then you need at least one of three things. And then I said, I know somebody who's not only good at one of those things, he's probably the best there is in the world. And he, if you want to ask him about English, he can really, he's very good at English. And he's also very good at theology. The thing that I'm really excited about introducing to him, he's really good at chemistry. And I said, I want you to meet, and there he came on. So I'm saying this, these links that we're talking about are actually intimately connected with who God is like. He is the chemist. He's not a chemist. He's the chemist. You know? The one that shocked me, and some of you know this, I'm sitting there, this is after dying in 2007, and the Lord brought me back, which was really nice of him. I'm asking him these questions. Some of you have this book, so you probably know. Questions that I was asking him was, it was simple, there's two of them. I said, what do you do that isn't religious? Because a good chunk of the people that I meet and the people you will meet are not religious. They don't have any interest in religious things at all. This is very much like Israel. Israel, back right from the very beginning, very few people had a religious calling. It's still true today. To be, for instance, a priest or a high priest, that's a specific religious calling. But the majority of people in biblical times, there were not 90% of them were religious. They weren't. They had callings, but not that kind of calling. So if you're going to be an evangelist and to witness, you need to know that the vast majority of people, if you say, could you be religious with me? They're not interested in that. They're not going, wow, I've always wanted to be religious. Matter of fact, being religious is one of the big areas that most people hate. They're always talking about some evangelist or some religious person that's saying something that's idiotic, or, that whole deal. You're not there to make them religious. You're there to give them back a chance of a correct relationship with the living God. So I'm asking the Lord, what do you do that isn't religious? And then the second question is actually a 2A and a 2B one. 2A, I asked, if you show me something in your book, this book, it's called the Bible, it's very big, that I mentioned, it should be thick. if you have that book, then in this way that God talks to us, I asked him, can you, if you want to say something to me in your book, and I find this verse or whatever it is, or this section that it seems like he's speaking to me about that, how will I know it's you that's showing it to me? And not, I had pizza last night and the great idea of this thing. Is it you showing me this? You need to know this in the Bible. Ask God to help you find what you're looking for. You can start at the, right at the beginning and keep working through section at a time. That's right too. But ask the Lord. Don't just assume that you know what you're supposed to say. Most of my ministry has been based not on a set of these things must be done in order to see people get saved. It's more like, which ones of these many things God has said do I need to use to speak to the people or the peoples that you've opened the door for me? Now, Sean Boltz is a friend of mine that I never actually spent much time with, and I thought he had read this book, and he hadn't. He had this religious background, deep religious background. And his parents forbade him from going to movies, to listening to any non-Christian music and stuff. So he had that pretty much all of his life. But when he dedicated his life to God, God opened the door for him to minister to the same people that his father wouldn't let him listen to. And that's what he's really good at now. So I asked him, this is the 2B question. Is this you showing me this? And then the second part is, if I'm looking at it, what does it mean? You'll also know this as you're reading scripture, that you can look at one verse and you can come back 10 years, 20 years later and read the same verse and see something you never saw before. Because with God, he's so multidimensional in the way he thinks and speaks that there's stuff, I believe this, there's stuff in the Bible that nobody's ever written down in another book because they still don't understand what it means or where that's found. I could show you some stuff that I've just got in the last 2 days about the virus and other things that's in Scripture. I never even saw it before. I never knew what it was. So what I'm giving you here is a way to approach the things you're supposed to do with God. And I asked him those 2 questions. 1, what do you do that isn't religious? 2, A and B. 2A, how will I know it's you showing me this particular verse or section? And then B, when I'm looking at that section now, how will I know what it means? That's all I asked him. So I thought, and I told him about this book. Remember I told you it took about 14 years to do it? I thought if I was going to do a second book, it would be still called Nature and Character of God, but this little subtitle on it there, I was not going to. The other thing about God, too, I need to tell you, is that he never does the same thing twice. He does the same thing, but not the same way. He says, if you want to know what I'm like, study what I've made. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. He's saying to you, look at what I'm doing. That's why you should start at the beginning, where he created. Then you start thinking like he thinks. So in doing this, when you're realizing God's doing all this different stuff, I thought maybe if I'm looking for, in this second book, I've got to tell you what that second book would be called. It would simply be called as described by, or something like that, the creation that he made. In other words, the second book will not be written like this one, which lays out this kinds of things. I'll just show you how this functions. And I think you'll enjoy this book. By the way, nobody gives away this book. So you're a special group of 100 people hidden here.
That's the 1 hour mark?
Yeah, this is the one that is not published, not republished at the moment. But the three, if you look carefully at that, can you see those three deals that Shaver had there? One, the first one, part one, God is uncreated. Part two, God is creator. And part three, he's triune. Those are those three things there. So each one has subtitles in it. Under God is uncreated, it's proposition one, God is uncreated. Proposition corollary one, God is infinite. Corollary 3, God is spiritual. Corollary 4, God is glorious. All of those are things that are bigger than we'll ever get behind. Okay, and all of those done are like that. And I'll just show you how this is laid out. I call this the greatest study in the universe because it is. It covers everything. And then, I'll just show you how it starts. Proposition 1, God is uncreated. These are scriptures that simply say that. That's what he's saying. So in the beginning, God. That's Genesis 1:1. Right at the beginning of the Bible. See that? And then these other verses. Then, when you've got these verses, there's the second part, because they're in another language. But we have to get back to English in order to be global. So this is the Hebrew ways that that word is described, or words are described, and these are Greek. So if you don't have the language, those books like that, I've got all kinds of books that do that kind of stuff, then you'll be able to see, not only do I know this word, God is creator or God is uncreated, I can see the way it was originally said in Hebrew and Greek, and that'll save you some time and some money. And then the third part of that, it's called questions and answers. When you're thinking about it, remember I asked God, how will I know this is you? See that? So this would be simple things like this. Who made God? These are the same kind of questions you'll get of people who think that, see? And here's the answer, no one. He had no origin and no beginning. There never was a time when he did not exist. This is impossible to illustrate because he is unlike anything and anyone else in the universe. That's why you can't get behind all these things. It's just true about him. And he says it, that thing. He doesn't bother to explain to you all of the things that means, because I think in heaven it'll be millions of years before we even start to know just what those things really mean. See? And got enough to get you saved, get you there and follow him and become part of 100 people witnessing to see people saved. But understand this, we'll never arrive, not with these things. Okay? So that questions and answers, and then the next sections is called analysis and discussion. So I've tried to take over the last 2,000 years from the time we first got at least the whole scriptures in print, and then go through discussions of what the church thought about having read it in the original languages. What are the discussions that go on? And the one I want to give you here on this, that's the most significant one, so just write this down. When I said, what is eternity? What is eternity? Now, the decision you make on that question, what does eternal mean, is going to affect your entire theology. None of us have got the final answer in this, but I'll tell you what, one that you choose to be, this is what I mean, if you think, this is what I mean by theology, in my theology, by that word eternity. Could be one of two things, if we boiled it down. Number one, God is timeless. We could think that. Eternity means he's timeless. That there is, in effect, for God not a past and a present and a future, because if it's timeless, to him it's all the same thing. And that's one huge chunk. Millions of people may read that eternal word like that. And so I've got Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, I've got Charles Hodge, I've got John Wesley, the one I just mentioned to you before. I've got Charles Finney, I've got C.S. Lewis, Dorothy Sayers, Arthur Custance. It's pages and pages of that. So what's that first one? If God, eternity may mean timeless. No past, no present, future. Now, Lewis, remember C.S. Lewis, Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe? Lewis had an illustration of that idea of timeless. There's a man up on a hill, and he's looking down at a huge line. He can see the back of the line, and he can see all the way through to the front of the line, but he can see them all basically, even if it takes this, he can see them all at the same time. So he could look at this part, or he could look at that part. That would be a good illustration of timeless. But there's one missing element in what C.S. Lewis said. The man up on the hill has time. See? He has time. So there's a second idea of time with God. That what that eternity is that God has a time much bigger and much more wonderful than ours. But it is a time. There is a past, there is a present, and there is a future to God in the Bible. I'm saying that because that's my choice. I could take the other one. But let me read you the, I'll read you the timeless version of it and see what you think of the Bible.
You've been an hour, so
I know.
you may want to try to finish in about 15, 20 minutes.
Just show you this. This is my Bible. It's not the Revival Study Bible, but then, of course, I didn't write any of the Bibles. But I do like this one. But if I was reading this particular one, it's hard to get to these days. It's called the Mark Reference Bible. The reason I like it's got all kinds of cool colors in it. And then if you're looking up something in the scriptures, they'll actually show you the colors that thing's talking about. Okay. So I like this one. I like it. But if I read this in the Timeless version, it'll read like this: in the beginning, now, and in the future, God created, creates, will create the heavens and the earth. And the earth was, is, and shall be without. Want me to keep reading? And God saw, sees, will see. If you read the Bible like that, it would be a very weird Bible. But that's what timeless is. I think a better picture of God is that he is time without our, much bigger than our time. Our time has a beginning and an end. The end is never going to happen with time with God this way, but it has a start. The earth has a start, and it wasn't there first. It's not the same as God. He made it. Before it, there was no time. That kind of time. But there always was. And that's actually what the Bible says. Time's eternal, it's called. A strange thing. Time's eternal. The reason I'm giving you that is this. If you pick the other one, timelessness, you'll come up with the same thought as that bunch of people in history have done. That's Eastern philosophy too. There's no future thing. See that? Which means if the picture that we have based on what God is in eternal or eternity is going to alter your entire picture of everything God does. So I'm going to send you a PowerPoint. I think you'll like it. It's called Quantum Guidance, and it's using quantum physics to describe a big problem that people have, and it says, I'll send it to you. You can look at it yourself because it's about 105 little things, and it's how many of you got PowerPoints? You got your own stuff and that, or borrow somebody's computer. Don't steal it because that's not Christian, and it's called sin. Don't steal. But if you can get one around you that's got PowerPoint thing in it, that's what I want to send to you. And of course, Kyle can do that. All right, now, reason coming back to this, that was done. That second volume is going to be based on an apologetics based on wonder, not argument. When you're talking to people about God, why God? Why do you believe in God and all that kind of stuff? It's a bunch of rubbish, you see. I want you to be able to have something that you can show them that you don't have to argue about at all. I want you to show them what has been discovered almost every single week. You know, when God allows us to see stuff, it becomes mind-blowing. And if it's fact, it's not a matter of argument. It's like, this is what it is. Do you see that? It's not if you're religious and if you've got a Bible and if you've got these things, then you'll believe that. It's got nothing to do with it. It has to do with Him. Here's my description of what law is in the basis of God. God's laws are descriptions of reality. If you've gone through 21 CR, you'll see that. God's laws are descriptions of reality from an infinite perspective. They're not made up things. They're not arbitrary things. They're not, who can guess what that thing is? They are descriptions of reality. In the Bible, He tells us what is true. You don't have to believe what it says, but you will discover that it is actually true. So if I said to you, I would like to be able to fly. Perhaps I could do it like maybe Superman, or I get a bat cape, or Spider-Man, maybe even a big parachute or something. I'd say if I jump off a 40-story building, this is a statement of reality, you will accelerate at 32 foot a second, and when you strike your head against the cement, you shall be paced. That is a description of reality. You don't have to believe it. You can go and see some Peter Pan movies and say, we can fly. But when you jump, you will die. It's as simple as that. When God says the soul that sins, it shall die, it is a description of reality. So tell me about the first time when people broke God's law. It's called in Genesis. After man's made, he's got a beautiful... By the way, when God made us, He didn't put a church around us. Isn't that a weird thing? You'd think that we'd all have to have one of these if we're really going to be Christians. But this wasn't even brought back into the show for thousands of years. So how does He get on doing that thing? Well, the creature He makes called man, man hasn't even got a girlfriend at this point. It's just man, is made in His image. He makes something like Him. Everything else, He talks. He invents water, and then He talks to water. If you think that's a fairy story, it's not. You have no clue what water is like. Water is one of the most astonishing things in the universe. That's why Martians, when they attack us, want our blood or our water, because they haven't got any. So anyway, if you're looking at the way things work, He invents water, that H2O thing I told you about. He invents it, and then He talks to it. And He says, make this, and it does. You think that's ridiculous. No, it's not. make this, and he does it. It does it. So then we come thousands of years later. Well, I don't think it was God. I think actually it was this and that, and these things came together. Who made the thing that's making? Where you're going to get your amino acids from, and if you have to invent them yourself, good luck. See that? Then he makes dirt, and that's huge too. He talks to it, and it does stuff. But when he comes to man, he makes him personal. Not just talking to something, he makes him. But he's still dead. He's just beautiful and incredible. And then he does this. And he's alive. How are you going to die? You're going to talk to people about dying? Because they are. We're all going to die one day. You're going to talk to them about dying? How will you know if you're getting close to dying? I'm not talking about being shot by the person that had the gun when you didn't have one of these to protect you from that thing. I'm talking about how will you know? He breathed. That word, breath, is the same word used for spirit. And he became a living soul, which means that when you die, like Jesus did, he really died on the cross. It wasn't just swooned and then he came alive in a cold tomb and then he was out of it again. When he died, he gave up the ghost. He stopped breathing. It's not the brain, it's not the heart. The way you can tell how close you are to death is the lungs. If your body no longer has oxygen, you die. That's why you hold up people's nose like this, they'll fight because they know if I can't breathe anymore, I'm gone. Whether you drown, whether you're shot, all these other things, when you stop breathing, you die. I'm a chemist. I have in my chemistry lab here sodium and potassium cyanide. I don't eat these. Well, you can smell them, but you have to smell very carefully. If you're going to smell something like that, you don't go, yeah, that's really different, isn't it? You're very, very cautious and you do this kind of thing, see that? But when you die, remember the old German things that they would put cyanide underneath it? They didn't do this personally, but it was put under their teeth that if they were caught, they would break the cyanide capsule in their teeth and they'd be dead in about 30 seconds. How does sodium or potassium cyanide kill you? The cyanide structure of it simply captures all your oxygen and you die instantly. So we had some rotten kids in our high school. I wasn't one of them, but I could have been, that got some cyanide and put it in bread and fed it to some seagulls. And the poor birds, they come in, they're not critical birds, they just come in, big seagulls, and they hit on the cyanide. They got about 30 feet in the air and dropped dead, right out of the sky. When Jesus dies, he gave up the ghost. When he's resurrected, life came back into his life and he came back. So for you, keep an eye on your lungs. Because if you lose oxygen, you're going to die. That's your base. All right, now, going all the way back, we started with a weird thing. What's this? I want to put in a second volume some of these amazing things so that people just looking at it can go, dear God, I knew that. And it is going to be dear God. Because this is design stuff that I'll just say it like this. In the last, I'd say at the most 25 years, more discoveries have been made just on the human body than in the last 2,000 years. How did we get those so fast? Because he can reveal stuff to people, and you don't have to be religious in order to do it. And that's why I said when God made man, first he was a bit lonely, so God gave him a girlfriend, which is wonderful. But she didn't have to be a worship leader because there wasn't anybody else. It was just the two of them first. So he didn't even have to put a box around them and say, this is called a church, and then I'm going to give you a book. It'll take a couple of 1,000 years, but you'll really like it when you get it. You don't have to have the religious connections in order to see people saved. So I'm there, and I'm recovering from dying, and I'm saying to the Lord, do you do anything that isn't religious? I thought there might be maybe 10 pages that I could put in this second volume. There's 600 pages. Maybe there might be 10 pages. And this is what he showed me. This is bigger than a phone book. It's 880 pages. That's its original thing. So you can imagine how shocking that is when you're just lying there and you're saying to God, okay, you've shown me this. That's really cool. But what does that mean? And he starts showing you again. So those of you who've seen this book, when you see it and read it, you'll see sometimes these dark, they're bold-faced. That's not in the Bible. That's what he showed me when I asked him. And 80% of that I've never seen before. I've got a good library. There's about 15,000 volumes between here and the US. None of these things in this. The vast majority, at least 80% of them, are they're not in any of my books. I haven't spoken about it. Never heard anybody speak about it. But just reading the scriptures with that in mind, he showed me things that I've never seen before. Okay? And the other wild thing about it is I've written 17 major books. These books, those little funny things, a huge chunk of them, I saw them before I wrote them. I saw them before I wrote them. I wasn't having a Ouija board and, doing this kind of thing and getting revelation by an angel going, write this down. I saw them, and I typed as fast as my little 3 fingers could do, and that's why they're there. Here's why I'm saying that to you. If you look at your book that way, he will show you. And it may not be anything like this, what you've seen. Remember, he never does exactly the same thing twice. If you're a singer, you know you'll never be able to sing exactly the same way twice. If you're a writer, next time you write, you'll add this or bits or change things. It'll never be the same. So in revival, it's another thing we really want to see happen. And revival, remember this, God never does any revival identical to any other one you've ever seen. You've got that list of amazing speakers and preachers and stuff from the past. If you look at what they were given and the way that even the works that they did, I've never been in a revival where it's been identical to another one. Never. Because that's the way he makes creation. Go out into you just look out, find a couple of trees together, same trees. They're not identical. Go to that one tree and look at 2 leaves beside each other. They're not identical. Go and find a pitch of grass and pull two of the little things out. They're not identical. So remember this. That's how he makes man. None of you are identical. You're always going to be unique. And the wonderful thing that I found about this, here's me. I'm 3 a.m. I'm talking to God. By the way, you don't have to say it out loud. He's really smart. When you're talking to him, he knows what you're thinking, and he knows what you're looking for. And he can also, he doesn't have to say out loud, not like, Jack. He doesn't have to do that. That would frighten the fat out of you. He actually did that. He can simply put that in. He's just like that. I want you to be able to read the Bible and get from the Lord what you've never seen before, but something he wants to show you. There may be thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that could use what you just saw. But I never want you to think it's got to be this, that, and this thing, and that thing, and without that, in that order, and that way, at that time. Here's David. He's got to go and fight the Philistines. They're big dudes, those Philistines.
You better wrap it soon.
And so God tells him, when you hear the sound of a move in the mulberry trees, go and fight them then, because you'll win. He does. And he does. He does win. And then they come back, because the Philistines don't give up easy. What would you do when he just showed you that? Would you go, oh, I know that. We wait for the mulberry tree. He doesn't. This is what he does. This is what I want you to do. He asks God again. I did come back. What do I do now? And God gives him something totally different than what he gave him before. And he goes up and he beats him again. Poor Philistines. They said, we got to stay away from those mulberry trees and the wind there, because you're really not that. You see that? Stay like him. Think like him. Read like him. Into this, because I don't know how much time we have. They'll probably do the thing they do with all.
An hour and a half. So.
Hour and a
I don't know
half.
how long they
We'll
have.
take a quick break, because I want any other questions that you have. I just boil all this down to say things like this. My quick one, at 3 in the morning, I'm saying to the Lord, because he showed me funny stuff, and I say, what else do you do? And he says, I am an entertainer. And I am so shocked at what he said, I said out loud, no way, because we get rid of entertainers because we're afraid that they'll wreck our children, and unless they're worship leaders, they have to be somebody who could be a worship leader. Then we could put them in the church because they'd be better, see. And then, or if they've just won the latest major football game, if they've won that, then you can give a testimony. But that's it, then leave. We don't want you here anymore. But when he said that, it so shocked me. I said, no way. And he said it again like this. I am an entertainer. You never mess with the I am. You ask who you are, he says, I am. Can't compare himself with anybody else. Just, I am what I am. I am. Just, oh, you am. I didn't know you wham that. It was wonderful. See? So when he said that, I got my little computer thing. I've got my wife here, which I want to show you, the gorgeous lady that I got to marry. Again, the mercy of God. I thought maybe there's a few verses on there. 36 pages later, which was given like that, I said, shoot, you really are an entertainer. He's not an entertainer. He's the entertainer. Back to John Wesley, this is what he said. If you want to understand a nation, study its entertainment. And that's what he did, and his brother did. That's how those 14,000 poems and songs came out, because he stayed up with what was going on in the world, and he stayed up with what God was saying to him, and still in use today. Okay, I'm sorry that's such a weird thing. And here is this lovely girl that I married. Here she is.
Hello, hello. I hear Peter and Teresa Cawthorne are there.
Yes, they are.
Where are they?
Well, they're somewhere here.
Well, hi there. I've just been out in our garden. It's spring. Well, looky there. Well, I'm still alive and kicking. I just had my 80th birthday. I'm older than Winkie. I asked the Lord if I could play tennis till I was 80, and it's a lot slower and not as fast. And people joke, oh, that was in, it wasn't out. Get your eyesight tested. Or quickly, did you have a knee replacement? They say to each other. Was that a hip replacement? But I've been thankful that all these years, I've been healthy. And I said to Winkie, all the years I've really run at airports, because Winkie's Polynesian. He doesn't like being early if he can possibly help it. if there's other things to do. And I said, if I hadn't been so athletic and grown up in the capital city of Wellington, which is very hilly, and run up and down the hills as a child and teenager, I wouldn't have been fit enough to have rushed around the world, run endlessly at airports, prayed that I'd be able to get some sleep on the flights, did weightlifting by carrying suitcases. So here I am in my latter years, still praising the Lord. And of course, here we are back in our home country, and whichever way God can use us or extend the gospel, and because Winkie is part Polynesian, part Maori, then right now there's all sorts of doors opening up, because right now it's popular to be Maori and they're teaching the Maori language in the schools, and I hardly recognize the weather reports anymore because it's all different pronunciation. I thought, wow, I was just getting used to, being in Texas all these years and hearing Spanish. Now everywhere I go, I'm looking around. Are you Maori or are you Tongan? Which are you, Fijian? Are you, which island from the Pacific are you from? So I feel like I'm a missionary in South Auckland, where we have a large portion of the pop. And I keep hearing different accents. You can hear my accent. I love putting on accents, whether it's Irish or English. I won't do a Texan one for you because my son would be embarrassed. But it's so fun with travel, hearing so many dialects, so many accents. I just find I copy them all the time, and it's fun. Anyway, see, in my garden, we've come out of winter, where there used to be a little stream flowing at the bottom of the property, just full of these big white lilies. This is a Mexican lime, which I didn't even know they had in New Zealand, so it's got hundreds on it right now. Citrus is great in Auckland. We've got lemons falling down all over the place, tangelos, all that good stuff. So although we're in COVID lockdown, we're praising God that we're on a peninsula and we've got the sea all around. We're about half a dozen houses to a very pretty little bay, and you can fish and all that, or you can walk around at low tide, and at the other end of the street you look across a big harbour to the back of the Auckland airport. Auckland has two huge harbours back to back. So, of course, in lockdowns, you don't see very many planes flying out like you normally do.
We can't fly anywhere at the moment.
But, yeah, it's great. And I've been going through hundreds and hundreds of photographs the last few days, and all these wonderful photos of Texas, and missing some of the squirrels that used to run around and some of the birds in East Texas. However, we have ducks all over our property looking for places to build their nests. We have a lot of ducks. Anyway, this is all the local stuff, just to fill you in on a little bit of idea. I love Jesus, and I was just thinking a few moments ago, if I hadn't stepped out in faith and gone to America, Winkie might not have ever ended up in America and evangelizing. Because when I was young, I'd gone to London to Bible college, and after 2 years, the word America kept coming into my mind, and I fasted and prayed. I said, Lord, I have no money to go to America. Mm-hmm. I don't know anyone in America, but it wouldn't be terrible if you really did want me to go to America, and more afraid of being afraid, than trusting you. Back then, it was like going to the moon or to one of the planets. There was no television connecting up the world. No one had their cell phones. It took 2 or 3 weeks for a letter to get from. Anyway, long story short, I fasted and prayed. I thought, this is what you have to do, because I couldn't tell if God was trying to speak to me. Was I too dumb to hear? Didn't I know? I loved the Lord. I wanted to evangelize. I wanted to get the gospel out every which way, however I could do it. And so, anyway, long story short, God answered. He flew me to the US. I had all sorts of unusual experiences. I literally was trusting God in faith for finance. But long story short, then Winkie, he was writing me, disappointed I didn't come back to New Zealand. He ended up coming up with a little group from Youth for Christ to America. I was, at that time, I was at Central Bible College.
It's not your time.
Anyway, it's not my time. But as you can see, Winkie ended up marrying me, and Yeah, all these years later, I'm just working on a little book called "Did You Ever See a Worried Sparrow?" And it's just our life story. It's stories of trust, of adventure, God's help, His guidance, His provision. I know Peter and Teresa know a lot about that, and I remember when we first met Peter. Anyway, I must go. And anyway, it's springtime and the garden's full of flowers, and Jesus is alive even in the midst of COVID, and He can heal you, and go for it and evangelize in Jesus' name. Amen.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Thank you, Bob.
Dad, you want to?
Yeah, you want to say something?
Well, you guys have been very patient. You probably want to wrap it soon, but if you had any questions, he's open. But if you got to go, then that's understandable as well. So Dad can't really go anywhere because we're still in level 4 lockdown here. So it's more on your end whether you guys want to get out of there or not. I can't hear.
Got to switch him on.
1 sec, I think he's saying. 1 second. They're fixing the audio. Sorry, I never learned sign language.
We have time for one question.
Excellent.
So, choose wisely. Understand the gravity. Who will it be? Step forward those who would serve. I've had hours. I've been blessed with days and days.
Ask if he would do anything differently going back. What would he do differently?
You want to repeat it?
If you could do it all over again,
Yes,
what would you do differently?
I'll do it again.
You do it again.
That's really good.
Well, that was easy.
Well,
Was
from
that
the
the only
bottom
question?
From the bottom of our heart, we love listening to you tonight and hearing your passion for God, and that you're still, one of our core verses here in our church is to run the race with endurance, with the joy that was set before us. And I just see joy overflowing with your family and your race. And it's just a great example to us. Like whenever I think of the Pratney family, I think of the word just run the race. And you're showing us to run. And your dad was a racer and he competed. And you're just inspiring us to run and run well. And we just, from the bottom of our heart, let's show our appreciation and love. We love you guys.
I'll send you some of the stuff that we've talked about. I'll send it to you, and then you can make sure the guys get it.
And hopefully somebody will be digitally minded and will create a better platform for Zoom, and they'll be they'll be gifted with that.
One day. We love you, Kyle. You're awesome. We love you
God
guys.
bless you guys from Texas. And
Thank you. And you too.
Thanks for everything. Bye.
Hi, Kyle.